we were planning this conference for September or October. But judging by what we were seeing, I mean the rapid deterioration of the situation around Greece in Europe, the possibility of going towards a climax of this crisis during the summer, which we have already, and also of the probability, I don't believe it is a certainty, and I hope, of course, it is not a certainty, of a much wider conflict in Ukraine and probably Moldova. Also, before the end of the summer, we decided that we have to adapt our schedule and our efforts to the political realities, not try the other way around. And I think we did right, in spite of the fact that this created a kind of organizational havoc and had some consequences also for participants, for which we are apologizing. You will get a new program because there are some things that are missing there. They will correct and they will distribute to you. And I must tell you that not only we live in the time point of in the point in the time of concentration of historical dynamics, but we are also making this conference in the center of the ancient Greek world. This is not a coincidence. We have chosen this place not only because it's a very beautiful place, but also because we believe we need to be inspired by the paradigm of ancient Greek world. It is, I remind you that in Athens, there was one of the first, not the first, but one of the first restructurings, radical restructurings of debt in history, the so-called Sysaxia. This provided the Athenians with the material and social conditions which have permitted the appearance, the emergence of the miracle of Athenian democracy. It lasted only 50 years in reality, because afterwards it came into rather a decay, but still it remains the more important paradigm of a democratic organization of humankind that we have up to our, until our days. The slogan, which maybe is representing more this aspect of things, is what the ancient philosopher Protagoras was saying. The man is the measure of all things. He was very much hated for what he was saying. And for centuries after he has lived, his writings were systematically destroyed by his ideological opponents. All we know about Protagoras is from his opponent Plato, who saved some of the things he said. Now, it is in this very place, 2,000 years after, that we see the opposite tendency. We see the emergence of a society, if the so-called market forces are going to win until the end, the emergence of a society where money will be the measure of everything. I'm a physicist by training, so I like very much abstract general theories. I judge them sometimes by their beauty, and I love simple equations explaining, so to say, composite situations. But still, as a physician, I have to count on facts and on data. Don't say anything about things you cannot count, as put it Lord Kelvin. In Greece, we can count where the whole of Europe is going. We can count it very well. This country has already suffered, as a result of a program supposed to help it, the biggest economic and social catastrophe after the Second World War in Western capitalist Europe. We have a 27% drop of GDP, which is more than the material losses of France and Germany during the First World War. It is comparable to what happened in the United States of America during the Great Depression, and also what it happened in the last 3 years of the Weimar Republic. By the way, there is an astonishing analogy between the Weimar example and what is happening now in Greece. In many aspects, we have the same set imposed on Greece by Troika of creditors, of economic policies that Chancellor Brüning has used with the known results in Germany at this period. What the victors of the First World War did to Germany, that is the imposition of huge war reparations going beyond the capacities of the country, has happened also to Greece with this amount of debt, which, by the way, has increased as a percentage of GDP during the years that all those international institutions are trying to save Greece from the debt, by the way, and from the deficit. I don't want to spend more time on the social, on the very many social and, which is more important, moral and political results of this program. But it is clear that it is a catastrophe. It is a catastrophe unprecedented for Western Europe after 1945. It is an absolutely predictable result. Many people have predicted all that. And it was not a mistake. Because if you do a mistake, then you correct it at some point. Even now, as we are speaking, Greece, the newly elected Greek government is pressurized to cut even the miserable pensions the Greek state is giving. It is under pressure not to apply the rather modest program it has promised before the elections to confront the humanitarian crisis. Those guys, like Juncker, like Merkel, like Hollande and the others, are now giving lessons to Greece, and they are impeding its government even to give food to citizens who are starved they don't have to eat. So this is not something which is happening in Greece. It's, as a matter of fact, a fundamental transformation of our societies. And I don't believe personally that it is happening just by chance, as an automatic result of economic factors. It is something which I believe we have in front of us a design of another society. They cannot announce this other society. They cannot describe it, because if they describe it, they will provoke a revolt. But it is what they are doing. We have to judge people by what they are doing. I believe so that what we're living here in Greece is really a reversal of this ancient, course towards democracy through the predominance of men over money. By creating the debt bubble, or by contributing in creating the debt bubble of Greece. As a matter of fact, they created a strong political weapon. What they did, they tried and they managed somehow to abolish nearly completely the Greek welfare system. But this is only the prologue to the demolition of European welfare system. We must not have any kind of illusions on that. They have tried for many years to do that. It was difficult. They were able to have some progress in this direction, but very limited, because European peoples were resisting. Now, with this debt weapon, they are able to achieve what they could not have dreamed in the past. The European welfare system remains one of the basic achievements of human civilization, of really world significance. They tell us now that it is more important to destroy it than not to pay for the Greek debt, which, by the way, is insignificant for European economies. That is also an indication that we are, first of all, we are not in front of an economic only, but we are in front of a very much deeper political and even, I would say, regime, so to say, planning. The second thing they were able to achieve with the Greek experiment is to abolish any possibility of Greek citizens to influence upon the decisions that affect their lives. Practically, Greek governments under Troika regime, they had the right to decide some things like, for instance, if they want blue or yellow taxi cars in Athens. Even this decision would have been examined from the point of view of its consequences for the budget. So we have a clear attempt to abolish democracy in all but name and formality. There is a third aspect which is even more important, because you can change the institutions, you can change the material situation of peoples and of individuals. But if you want to proceed to regime change, to a fundamental regime change, you have also to change the ideas of people. This is what they are trying to do. There is a Kafka in action in Greece. There is a communication program, which, I remind you, began by the big international press 1 year before the attack of the market forces against Greece. They began to use the big newspapers, they began to use the acronym PIGS to describe the peripheral countries of Europe. And then, especially the German press, has attacked Greece in a way never seen in Europe after 1945. It has reminded us of the same attacks that they were orchestrated against the so-called rogue states, against Serbia, against Iraq, against Libya, before an actual military intervention takes place. This has happened also in the Greek case. We had a communication attack both inside the country and outside the country against Greeks with various aims, which prepared, in fact, the final attack by the markets and gave to the Greek government of that time the necessary justification to sign the first bailout program. Somehow, Greek people are now in a situation which maybe it's not exactly similar, but it reminds us of the situation that Germans were living in 1945, French were living in 1940, the Soviets were living in 1991. Sometimes people who are living in Frankfurt or in Paris or in Stockholm, they may be conscious of the objective situation, and they may be very radical in their approach, but they cannot really feel they cannot really imagine how the Greek people is feeling. That means you have individuals who know that they will not be able to finish their life in a honorable way, taking even a minimum income, that they will not be provided, most probably, with enough health care, that their children, they don't have any future. So this is creating a huge psychological and political effect because it is destroying, and I think it is its purpose to destroy, the belief of the nation into its capacity, the belief of the people into its capacity to self-rule. This is why I believe what we live here in Greece, it's an important paradigm for a very fundamental transformation of our societies, which was somehow designed by people like Hayek and his friends, and it was applied by what is we can really call the Leninists of the markets. We are not just confronted with accidental things which happen out of objective laws of economy which are in work here. This transformation has not only to do with what is happening in the psychology and in the beliefs of the Greek people. It has to do with what happens also to all Europeans. As a very known and a very important Greek composer said, the important thing when you see a monster is if you are revolting, if you are revolted, if you grow your opposition to it, if you don't oppose it, if you become indifferent, you assimilate yourself somehow, as Manos Hatzidakis has said, with the monster. Now, in actual political life, or European political life, the dominant message for the other Europeans is the following. For Southern Europeans, it is take care. Take care, because here is the example of what it will happen to your countries in case you are not obeying the alliance of German and European elites of the financial capital. Don't speak too much about solidarity with Greeks. Look to what can happen to your own countries. I believe that this is we can find also an indication that this is a directive and not just a program happening automatic, to the fact that if we take the statistics of the peripheral countries of Europe, we see clearly that they have created a number of different situations for different countries, thus creating an objective basis which would impede the formation of a kind of alliance between them. If in Greece the GDP has fallen 27 or 28% during the 5 years of bailout program, in Italy this set of policies has provoked 8% of drop of GDP, which is much lesser. So this is creating a kind of motivation for Italy not to go with the other southern countries to confront what is a project of deep antisocial transformation of European Union. And of course they don't do it for that. The position of Italian, of Spanish and of Portuguese government, as it is not also out of a judgment about the situation of their countries, it's also a reflection of the degree that European political elites are now nearly completely controlled by finance and by Americans. The last time there was a kind of European independence, it was when Presidents Chirac and Chancellor Schroeder opposed the United States on the Iraq question. I think this was the last demonstration of a really existing independent Europe. They have made a lot of progress in controlling all the European elites. And this is also the fundamental explanation for their obedience. So if this is the game with the other peripheral countries, there is also something to say to the northern countries, to the countries which are profiting, like Germany, because Germany is, in financial terms, has profited from this Greek catastrophe in many ways, in strict financial terms. We all know that, and I say this because this is an important, I believe, topic which we have to address in our work. They have tried to find a pretext for the German nationalism or patriotism, or you say as you like, to express itself without all this guilty which has accompanied it after the Second World War. They gave two things to the German people. They gave the possibility to dream again of dominating Europe. They don't say that, of course. They cannot say that, but this is a reality, and this is a reality affecting the subconscious, the real level where German population is deciding its attitude, and in the same time, they oriented this, after all, normal awakening of the German national feeling and of the German identity. I personally find it absolutely normal, but they were able to orient it against the southern peoples of Europe. In total, they were confronted with a huge crisis, obviously, for which obviously were responsible the big international banks in 2008. It is a triumph for these great banks and hedge funds that they were able to transform their own crisis into a crisis between European peoples, into a clash between European nations. It is an enormous political triumph. And in the same time, it is an enormous political triumph for them that they were able to orient the German national feeling not to the leadership of an autonomous role for Europe in the world, but against the poorer and weaker regions of Europe. I think this is a price that Germany will pay very much at some point in the future, as it has paid it also in the past. Even if our wars, to use the excellent formula of Professor Hudson, are now debt wars, at least for the time being, they are not military wars which we are facing in Europe. This is, I think, it's a very important point, because when we analyze current European politics, we see the importance of the nation, and we see also the difficulty of the left to deal with this problem. We decided to, one of the reasons we decided to organize this conference is that we wish to begin a frank discussion about the difficult topics. One of the reasons that European left, radical left, has huge problems, in spite of its successes, is the fact that they still try to avoid those problems. The relationship between nation and the left, if you want, the nation has been historically, during the 20th century, the bigger ally and the bigger enemy of the left. So the national question remains today the key to who will get political hegemony in European countries. Syriza, for instance, was able to become a government in alliance with independent Greeks because it was able to express, in spite of its own hesitations, and making in a self-conscious way, it was able to be presented as a subject of a national and social subject for the salvation of the country. Marine Le Pen in France is having this success, and maybe she can become the next president of the French Republic, because she was able to take the flag of the nation, which the left has left. Of course, those are my personal judgments, which I share with you. In this conference, we are all free to express our views and to disagree, and this is exactly what we want to provoke. But still, we cannot avoid the question of the nation because of its pivotal role in European politics. The whole question where Europe will go will depend on who and in what way will use the national feeling of Europeans, which is still very strong and very existent. And it will become more strong and more existent as the vision of a Europe of prosperity, of better future and so on, it is fading away. In such situations, and given the fact that there is not an alternative vision like there was, at least good or bad, but there was something in the form of a practical example with the Soviet Union. So now the collapse of the Soviet Union in the minds of people is 1 million times more strong than all the Tina arguments of Mrs. Thatcher. Because here we had an alternative system, not organized according to market and capitalist methods, and it collapsed. So this has created a huge, so to say, mental and psychological, had huge mental and psychological repercussions to the minds of people in all over the world, not only in Europe. So we have Europeans who are terrified by the prospect of crisis, and at the same time they don't have an alternative vision of organization of society. What more normal than to retreat to the strong identities, and the nation, I should say, it's an identity which is not only used to suppress or to antagonize other nations, but it is a deep identity, the feeling of belonging to a group. The question, as I see it at least, for the European left, is the European left going to express this deep need, or it will be the European far right which will be the best candidate for expressing the needs of the European nations? It is a little bit, it's similar to what Europe was confronted, especially in Russia and Germany, during the intra-war period. And this is, I think, one important point. We would like to hear also your views. Even I can say that we are living in a situation where sometimes I meet German or Spanish leftist people. They are, of course, in solidarity with Greece, all this stuff. But because they are afraid that Syriza will fail, they try somehow, they will not tell it, of course, but they try to keep some distance. Of course, there is no distance. They will not be able to keep any distance. A defeat of Greece, that is, if it is proven practically that the Greek nation state cannot defend even a small part of its independence, and it cannot defend its citizens, it will have enormous consequences for all Europe, whatever we want, whatever distance we take or whatever we do. It will have, in some way, I will use also now the analogy between financial and military wars of the past, it can have the same consequences that the defeat of democratic Spain had in 1939. Of course, we don't have in front of us Hitler and Mussolini, but I'm not sure that the neoliberals, the neoconservatives, and all those people, we are very, very much better. I should say that all this is happening in a world environment where we see many things. One of these, take for instance the situation in the Arab world. We have a transition from the classical imperialism where we were conquering, we Westerners I mean, conquering different countries. Now we're destroying countries. It is Iraq, Syria, Libya are destroyed. Of course, they were not democracies, as no country in the Middle East is a democracy. But they were quite progressive regimes. We helped the Islamic State, and now we are saying, oh, let's make a war against terrorism there. I should, at this point, remind you what has happened in the past with the Vietnam War and with the Algerian War. We had huge demonstrations, big movements in Europe against that. I don't see anything of the sort now. We have big movements in Europe against the course towards a new Cold War, against missiles, against all this at this time. Now we don't have anything of the sort. Even the establishment in the United States and Europe was deeply divided about that. We had John Kennedy and his brother, who, as a matter of fact, they stopped a nuclear war with the Soviet Union. We had Charles de Gaulle, this peculiar phenomenon, combining somehow more radical ideas than one could wait from a bourgeois politician. Even 10 years ago, we had Chirac, Schroeder, and big demonstrations. Now we don't have anything. And that means that also we are transforming ourselves. We are changing. We become less interested in the values that traditionally were the values of European democracy and of European socialism. Take, for instance, also the transition in the ex-Soviet Union, where many people have hoped when Gorbachev has arrived that he will really transform the socialism into a humane regime. Others have helped that now we are going to the paradise of market, to the dollars and freedom paradise, especially after the bombing of the Congress of People's Deputies by Boris Yeltsin, with the encouragement of all Western governments. What we witnessed in Russia and the other countries of the ex-Soviet Union, the transition from a dictatorship, a supposedly proletarian dictatorship, to a mafiosi oligarchic supposed democracy. Well, if we want to make a synthesis of all that, what is this? This is a gigantic counter-revolution which is taking place last decades. It began with the neoliberal ideas in the 70s, with Thatcher and Reagan. It went on with the betrayal by François Mitterrand and the French Socialist Party of any alternative claim, and it got to a climax with the collapse of the Soviet Union. Some people may ask me, do we are really in need of such abstract schemes and theories which may look a little bit of a theory of conspiracy or something like that? I say that if we want to fight in an effective way against what is happening in Europe, as the famous and very important Swiss sociologist Jean Ziegler has put it, we have, first of all, to know what is the enemy and to name it. He says that the enemy is the finance, and I agree with him. The second thing is to study very well what they want to do and how they will do it. You cannot win over an enemy if you are not at least on the same level with him. David was able to win over Goliath, but we cannot, if he was more stupid than Goliath, he could not win anyway. But this is not simply a question of intelligence and stupidity. It is also a question of, there are more important factors playing here. And unfortunately, Syriza is giving us an example, because Syriza was able to use all the very radical slogans of opposition to the debt agreements Greece has signed, was able to canalize in an electoral current for Syriza all the, so to say, big movement with nearly insurrectional demonstrations which has taken place between 2010 and 2012. But I think most of us will agree, because here we have among us many different views on Syriza. This is absolutely permitted and even encouraged. There are people who are supporting very much this experiment, and they think it's a big hope for the whole of Europe. There are people who believe that nearly even now Syriza has solved everything. No, now I'm not going to enter into this discussion. What I want to say is that Syriza it is now in this tragic situation, in this very, if not tragic, very difficult situation, because they were counting only on the good scenario. They adopted all the slogans, they used the dynamics, but not all the analysis which was accompanying those slogans and these movements. They have hoped that it is enough to be elected, it is enough to try to make a better negotiation, to have a better result. They were not conscious of the radical character of the attack against Greece. I don't mean that they did not have to negotiate hard, to use all kinds of legitimate arguments in the actual European context, not use any kind of differences among creditors. Given the weakness of the country, I would be 1,000 times for a compromise, if a compromise gives any hope of at least stabilizing the situation in what it is. Otherwise, you have to go to a clash with the Troika. But a clash with Troika, it's a real war, and not a war only financial. It can have also a huge geopolitical dimension. So we see here that, as a matter of fact, they did not wish to do it. They did not, and this is why they were not prepared for this scenario. If your opponent knows that you are not prepared for the war scenario, you will not get the best, because he has no interest in providing you something. By the way, I met the German ambassador in Athens some days ago in an off meeting. My impression, the impression I got from him, is that they are not conscious of what is at stake here. They believe that they have a guy, Tsipras, who is not very, how to say, they need somehow, he's insisting more than they were waiting, he's insisting more than they are used by other European leaders and by previous Greek governments, but finally what he will do, he will come to the norm. They are not conscious of the serious possibility of an accident and of what this accident could mean for themselves. An accident at some point, because I cannot know what level or at what levels of the international system the accident is real, that is the unwilled consequence of the action of different actors who cannot predict the consequences of what they did, and if there are points in the international system which won't, as a matter of fact, or are anyway well prepared for such an evolution. And I think, my feeling is that all radical European left, or nearly, we don't want still. We are under the impression that we are living this is politically incorrect for left, but this is what we all feel, that we are living in the better conceivable world, and we don't want to lose this. Most Europeans live well in Europe. They have a big psychological difficulty to accept that we are entering very quickly into a very different situation which will affect the life of millions of people and world peace. We don't want, as Albert Jacquard, this famous French genetician, had said, the bigger obstacle to grasp the reality is the limits of our imagination. So I think I already made an abuse of your patience and time. I will close here my speech saying that there is another thing to which I did not refer and which is also a key for the European situation. If the one key is a national question, the other key is how we will position ourselves to the great geopolitical challenges of our times, especially in relation with Russia and Ukraine. In this conference has 2 or 3 aims. One of it is, of course, to hear the views of everyone. And we decided to invite people from very different regions of Europe, and even some people from the United States, to be able to provoke a kind of exchange, a kind of osmosis between people who are thinking in very different national environments, and they are making policy in strict national contexts usually. This is no more possible. It is a long time that this is not possible. We are completely irrelevant if we stick only to a strict national context. We would be very glad to hear proposals, ideas, how to proceed from where we are. Practical ideas and also ideas about the programmatic opposition to Euroliberalism. We hear voices for a return to Keynesianism. Some other people want the destruction of the European Union, but I am not sure that this is a political program. And this is not a vision. If we don't acquire an alternative vision, those who have an alternative vision, at least they say they have, I don't know what they will do in power, and which is the far right in Europe, will win.